sub $200. It does a ton of stuff. This little product is awesome. However, it's not perfect. This is the SMSL DL100. So sit down, grab a cup of coffee, and let's talk about the SMSL DL100, what it does, and who it's for, and if you should buy it. This is a bit of a Swiss Army knife of hi-fi products. It is a digital to analog converter. It is a headphone amplifier. It has a remote control, so it can be a digital preamp. And look at the beautiful, huge display. It's usable though, which is good because even sitting across the room, I at least know what input I am using. I at least know what volume it's putting out. Kind of. We'll talk about that here in a second. I did a video, I guess you would call it its bigger brother, the DL200. And I loved that product because it did so much for such little money. That's right. This one, the DL100, kind of brings that same value proposition forward. This is, I believe, about $180. So for $180, you're getting a headphone amplifier. You're getting a fully functioning DAC with Bluetooth, but more importantly, HDMI ARC. That's right. On the back, you have balanced outputs, single-ended outputs, a coaxial digital input, an optical digital input, an HDMI ARC input, a USB-C input, and Bluetooth. That's right, LDAC, aptX, and aptX adaptive Bluetooth. If you're into Bluetooth, that's cool. Also has an internal low noise switching power supply. Their words, not mine. It sounds fine, I'm sure it is a low noise switching power supply. Let's talk about all the specifications and all the stuff underneath the hood, the good hardware. Back in that bag again. Whoa. I love the way that they describe their products. Utilizes 3 pieces, high-end op amps, OPA 1612, and numerous audio-grade components. The audio clock processing circuit helps reduce clock jitter greatly. Good. Using a large number of audio-specific audiophile grade resistors and capacitors. You get both of those. Equipped with a full-featured remote control and pre-mode, and it has the coveted Japan Audio Association high-res certification. So it's a DAC. It does DSD, does PCM. If you don't know what a DAC is, it's a digital analog converter. Takes the ones and zeros and makes them into yummy analog music. Nothing super special here. What is a bit special is that it's using 4 Cirrus Logic CS43131 chipsets. And it reaches an unprecedented level of 0.00, hold on, I gotta get this right, 0.0009% THD. Negative 120 dB non-weighting distortion. Well, there you go, folks. This is the best thing ever. It's unprecedented. Does that translate into musical enjoyment? We'll find out later. Stick with me. All right, let's just go over this. Let's get it over with. DSD native support up to 256. PCM 32-bit, 768 Hertz. Supports MQA and MQA CD. Full decoding. Claims to be 3 watts into 16 ohms times 2 for the headphone amplifier. They don't say whether that is peak or RMS. 1.5 watts times 2 into 32 ohm headphones or 32 ohm loads. What I will say is that I had it hooked up to the Verum, the new Verum headphones, and it did okay. I didn't have to max out the volume. This isn't the easiest headphone to drive. It's a planar magnetic, but there's no different gain settings. So if you want to listen to like IEMs on this thing, I don't know how it's going to do. probably going to drive most headphones in most situations to loud enough levels. However, we need to have perspective on this product. It's less than $200. It has a headphone amplifier. Chances are that it's not going to do everything perfectly. It's not going to outperform every DAC at its price. It's not going to outperform every headphone amplifier at its price. It does a lot of things well though, but not perfectly. Back in that bag again. The interesting thing about this Cirrus Logic chip is it's a combo DAC and headphone amplifier on one chip. And I think that opens up a ton of possibilities for super affordable products that have decent performance. I'm not going to say it has the greatest performance. I mean, if we're looking at the measurements, this should be revelatory. But measurements don't always tell the entire story. They rarely tell the entire story. These combo chipsets, though, open up a world of possibilities for ultra affordable products that do a lot of things. There is the SMSL SE300, I believe, M300 SE, which comes in at $130. So $50 less expensive. No HDMI input on the back. So I feel like this product, the DL100, is kind of like the next iteration of the M300 SE, which is a spectacular little unit because it has balanced outputs. It checks off a lot of boxes at a great price. And it's cool that they're doing more stuff with it. Let's talk about what I like, what I don't like. I like that it has an HDMI ARC input. I don't like that it doesn't have a subwoofer output. However, I don't know why I just put two fingers up. However, it does have balanced outputs and single-ended outputs, and I hesitate to say this, and a regular single-ended headphone output, all of which you can have playing at the same time. Bear with me here. You could, if you have an amplifier or an integrated amplifier that has balanced inputs, you could run the balanced inputs into your integrated amplifier. You could run the single-ended inputs, the RCAs, to a subwoofer or to a wireless subwoofer adapter. You could adapt the 6.33 millimeter headphone adapter to RCAs and then send it to a subwoofer. I don't know if I'd recommend that. However, you would be getting a change in gain on all of those stages. It's not ideal. It would have been cooler if they just put a subwoofer output on it. However, some amplifiers like the Fuzzy Audio ZA3, which I could see this being connected to, do have a subwoofer output. So there are ways around it. Personally though, if I was designing this, I'd want to have a subwoofer output on it because of the HDMI input. This is meant to get hooked up to a television, I would imagine. Speaking of the HDMI ARC connection, one of the things I also don't like, it works perfectly. I put it in, was watching Bluey in no time at all. Everything is great. When I control volume though on my Apple TV going into my regular TV, normally on most components you change volume on the source, i.e. the Apple TV, and you will see a simultaneous change in volume on the source or the preamp or whatever it is. When I moved the volume up and down on the Apple TV, nothing changed on the display. It got louder, it got softer, nothing changed on the display. I'm kind of splitting hairs here, but most components, you see a change in volume. There was also a bit of a lag, so when I would turn the TV on, when I would get it going, it would take a while before audio would actually come out of this. However, enough foreplay, how does it sound? Sound on the headphone amp, it sounds a little bit thin to me. There's not as much body on the bottom end. That doesn't really matter when you're using it as a preamp, and I didn't really notice it being a problem. If anything, it was actually a benefit when I was watching television for dialogue. But purely as a headphone amplifier, I've heard a lot better. It's not bad. It has enough power. Not a lot of punch on the bottom end. No richness. Just seems a little bit sterile. It was very detailed. Very detailed. However, this would not be my first grab if I was going to listen to some music on my headphones in my easy chair. From memory, and I don't have it anymore because I've given it away to a patron, which, by the way, if you want to be part of the best hi-fi community anywhere in the entire world, check out my Patreon, patreon.com/cheapaudioman. Every other Sunday, we have patron-only Zooms. We also have a Discord, and we also have a Facebook group. Anyway, the DL200, from memory, sounded better than the DL100. I don't have it anymore, though, because I gave it to a patron. So take that for what it's worth. That might not be worth anything, but I remember being way more impressed with the DL200. The thing about it is, though, with the HDMI input, the DL100 has a lot more options. It's also interesting that the DL200 is actually a Sabre DAC, so it's a ES9039Q2M. You could say the DAC chips don't make a difference, and it may not, but since the DAC chip is on the same board as a headphone amplifier in the DL100, I can't help but think it does make a difference, or the DL200, the analog output stage, is a little bit different. I'm not saying it sounds terrible, I'm just saying I like the DL200 better when listening to headphones. Okay. It has 5 filter roll-offs for the DAC, which is not uncommon. There's almost always different filter settings. Except for my favorite DACs, like the Gishelli Labs J2 or J3, although I haven't had the J3 in. The Gishelli Labs Daisy, the Denafreps Aries. Although with the Denafreps, I think you can do oversampling and non-oversampling. I don't think that's really considered a filter, though. I like a DAC just to sound good as it is. However, I do know that a lot of people like to have a bunch of options. So, you have options. There's 5 of them. Do they make a huge difference? I don't think so. Weird controls. Okay, so you can control this locally. When you press the knob in, different options come up. The majority of the time, though, you have to twist the knob to select which option you want. The majority of the time, though, you will go through all the options and then it'll just kind of repeat. But it just kind of goes from one end to the other. So you get to one end, don't like that, you miss something, you gotta go back. It's not bad, it's just a little bit odd. Once you get used to it, you're used to it. One of the things I do like is it has 2 USB modes. I'm generally not listening from my computer. I'm generally streaming my music from an actual music streamer like a Weem Mini, Weem Pro. But if you're a computer lover, if you're into Audiovana, like Ed, like dozens of people that are into Audiovana. Okay, let's do this. If you're into Audiovana, put it in the comments. I want to see just how. I'm going to do a poll. I'm going to actually do a poll. All right. This is an inside joke between me and one of my patrons. So it has 2 USB modes. One is driverless, so it has USB mode 1 and 2, or 1.1 and 2. The other one, well, you're going to need a driver, but you get more control from the computer by having those 2 modes. So what are my final thoughts? Final thoughts. The SMSL DL100 does a whole bunch of stuff. Some of it does well. I think from the standpoint of being an HDMI, connecting your TV to somewhat of a soundbar replacement, I think it's great. I don't think it sounds great as a headphone amplifier. I don't think it sounds terrible as a headphone amplifier. It's not the type of headphone amplifier that I would want, though. It's not the type of DAC headphone amp combo that I would want for personal listening. It may not be a problem for you. It may be perfect. You may love that sound, that ultra clean, clear sound. Obviously, this thing has a really good signal to noise ratio, has really good dynamic range, but if it has great dynamic range and it doesn't really translate into lush, yummy music, then it doesn't really matter. Usable display, has a remote control, everything works how it should work. Variety of output options. It's a good product. It's a great product. If it sounded better on the headphone amplifier, this could be one of those like product of the year nominees because it does so many things and it's so affordable. The one thing that I always ask a question of is, like, I get the HDMI in here, but then the headphone amplifier I don't really get. Because if this is hooked up to your TV, chances are you're probably not listening to headphones. I get that some people do want an all-in-one component, and from the standpoint of being an all-in-one component for less than $200 that can do so much, this is good. Kind of a jack of all trades, master of none though. However, there's not really any other products out there. There are some acrylic products that have an HDMI input, but I don't think are as refined as the DL100. If the DL200 would have an HDMI ARC input, then I think that would be nearly a perfect product. There are some ultra cheap ways to get HDMI into your system. Ironically, an SMSL product. This is the PS100. And basically this is an HDMI optical DAC. I don't think it sounds very good, but for TV watching, I think it's fine. I think this is like 30 or 50 bucks. I'm not blown away by this product, but it's a good product. I believe it's being marketed kind of as a headphone amp DAC though, and in that use case scenario, it wouldn't be my first choice.